Okay, now we're going to talk similar to the previous video about how to know what to say, how to make your decisions. The same principle, except now we're going to apply it to understanding greater things in life and the world. Destiny, the principle of destiny. People believe in destiny. It's meant to be, it's meant to be. It's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. Then they go and talk about law of attraction. Anything you think you can achieve. And it's my destiny. So I can achieve anything I can think of as long as it's my destiny to get it. This is so hypocritical, so contradictory. So how do we resolve that? Well, destiny is a cop-out. If I didn't get it, I say, oh, it's not that I'm lazy. It's not that I was unreasonable. It's not that I didn't work hard. It's not that I was dishonest. It wasn't my destiny. It's a cop-out. Now, there's a lot of so-called religious, spiritual rules, concepts that we need to understand, like the concept of destiny. Where did it originally begin? And the previous video was talking about what do I do now so that I'll have a better future, considering the future results of my actions. Now we're going to talk about what is there right now and where did it come from? Why was it this way? We're going to talk about why women are the way women are, in a sense of subjugated by men. So please, let's open our minds and not be feminists or chauvinists or anyists. And don't be a woman, don't be a man at this moment while I'm giving this talk. And just be an alien with asexual, which doesn't have this gender issues and gender equalities and all of this stuff, in your fixed opinions, and let it all go to say, I'm trying to learn why humans are the way they are. Why are they so messed up? How did they get so messed up? How did they really just so screw up the way they are? Okay, that's what we're here to talk about. So you're not a man, you're not a woman, you're not a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian or an atheist or an anything. Just an alien, asexual alien, all right? So, first of all, and of course you're not of any religion, okay? So, let's talk about women being covered according to Islam. Now, in the Quran and everything about Islam, women are supposed to be revered, actually. Muhammad was revering women. Women, and there are quite a few passages which say that women are superior to men. This is Islam. If we look at Muslims, I don't think they read that part, did they? No. The women are covered. Why are women covered, according to Islam? So let's go back to when Islam was created. First of all, Judaism predates Islam by about 1,500, 2,000 years, something like that. Now, what happened here? We've got so many similarities in Islam, like halal is like kosher. I mean, it's pretty much infringement on copyright. I mean, it's almost letter for letter. The rules of Islam are the same as Judaism, as kosher. Even the way you kill an animal, they've taken the same principles of the way to kill the animal, slaughter the animal. What you eat, what you don't eat, same. In fact, when a Muslim cannot find a halal butcher, he goes to the kosher butcher because he knows that it's done the right way to kill the animal, I mean. So right away we have to look at a lot of the rules which were basically taken from Judaism, okay. Now we're going to look at why are the women covered And we have to look at what Muhammad was trying to do. So we go back then and we've got the Middle East with a lot of warring tribes. And they were just Bedouins, vagabond tribes. And they were going into other villages and raping and killing and stealing the women and taking them to use them for themselves. So they came up with the idea of covering their women totally so that when their village was invaded, the invaders couldn't tell who's who, who's pretty, who's young, who's old, who's ugly, who's what. Or are they men hiding under these robes? And if they try and grab them, they're going to get killed because it's a man, not a woman. So the Bedouins took up this idea long before Muhammad, took up this principle of covering their women for this reason. Now, they're also the most roughest, violent group in the Arab world. It's just a fact, okay? It's what it was. Check your history. So when Muhammad was trying to unify the Arab world, the Bedouins, being the wheel that squeaks the loudest, said all the women need to be covered because this is what we do. And in order to maintain peace, they basically, being a more violent bunch, pushed this principle of covering the women throughout the Muslim world. And now it's become known as something that Muslims do. When it's not what Muslims do, it is not what Islam teaches. Islam teaches modesty. It says be modest. Where does modest come to being completely covered except for your eyes? And boy, are they good with eye makeup, you might notice, if you dare look them in the eyes. And then, if you're a woman in Saudi or in any of these, Arab countries where the women are dressed totally in black, covered, even with a veil in the eyes, go into a woman's bathroom, so I'm told, and they take off their black garb, and they're wearing, as one woman told me, she says, boob tubes and mini skirts and high heels, and boy, they are dressed so hot and sexy underneath their black garb. Okay? Because that's the reality of women. So, they are not modest. Quran teaches be modest. They're not being modest. They're being covered because their men make them do that because that is the tradition when the Arab world was ruled or ruined by vagabond, violent tribes who survived based on stealing other people's women. So if a Muslim were to look at the truth of their traditions, they would have to say, okay, what are we going to do? Maintain the traditions from when we were violent animals, or are we going to grow up and mature and refine and get on with the world as it is today? So you got a choice, huh? We know what they're choosing. Now, the other reason that it comes to being this subjugating of women, we'll go to Judaism. Now, only relatively recently, like in the last 80 years or something like that, Jewish women could read and be educated. Prior to that, a Jewish woman was not allowed to read or be educated. So why were women kept dumb, uneducated? Is it because they're inferior to men and can't learn? I don't think so. That's pretty obviously not true. But of course they were because they were kept dumb, right? So we've got Islam and Judaism. It's like this in many religions. Mormons, same. A lot of Christians. Why were the women put down? First of all, why did they allow it? Well, because men are bigger and stronger and beat the shit out of them if they didn't. Okay, so they had not much choice. Physical survival. And why did men want this to happen? Because they're men and therefore childish, egoistic, and sex monsters who just want to keep women under control. So the idea is the controlling of women by keeping them limited and restricted, and the culture Of course, now Jews are very different, but Muslims still pretty much keep that. And I think, religious Jews maybe probably keeping that, the fanatic religious, is to make sure that you do not think. And if you do not think, you will not learn. And if you do not learn, you will not be skilled. And if you are not skilled, you will not be able to earn your own money. And if you do not have your own money, you are my slave and total dependent because I've got all the money. And then you will never leave, and you will put up with any shit I give you, and you'll do anything I say because you've got no choice. Not only you don't have money, but you don't have the means to earn money, which means you do not have the means to support yourself and the children if you think of taking them away from me. And I'm in total control. So, you see, these are the things we have to think of. Why are women covered in Islam? Why are religious people saying that women are inferior? I love the Mormons. Okay, get this one. Check this out. It's true. It's true. I've got it from Mormons themselves, so this is not hearsay. Why does a Mormon man have multiple wives? Because the Mormons do this too. They can have 5, 6, 10 wives, many as they want. Why does he do that? Well, because when Mormonism was growing and started, they were persecuted. So there was a lot of warring going on, a lot of fighting, and a lot of Mormon men were getting killed. So you had a big outnumber women to men. Now, you see, the problem is, according to Mormonism, is that a woman who is not married can't get into heaven. I like that one. If you're not married as a woman, a man, he doesn't have to be married. He gets to go to heaven, of course. God's a man, right? But if you're a woman, the only way you can get into heaven is if you're married. So because there's a lot more women than men, it's a man's duty to do the women a favor by marrying her so she can get into heaven. And because there's 5 times more women than there are men, for example, whatever the number is, the ratio is, I got to marry 5, 6 women to make sure no one is left out so you all get to go to heaven. Isn't that brilliant? Okay, so look for the original reason that anything exists. We're in a different world today. 50 years ago, nobody's going on the internet. Nobody is checking the books to see what was the original teaching. Where did this come from? What's the history? No. Too busy working to survive. No interest. Listen to the priests, the great religious leaders who said, I know. I devote my life to studying. I'll tell you what you need to know. Why did they say, go forth and multiply and breed like rabbits? Bigger workforce. Okay? Now, when they said that 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, there weren't many people on the planet. And the health conditions were pretty bad. So there was a lot of infant death, child death. We're dying young, 20 years old, 30 years old. Okay? This is dying young. So you need to breed a lot to keep the population going because the death rate was so high. There's logic to that. Pretty good idea. Otherwise, we might die off. But today, different. Today, women not only can go to school, but they can be leaders of countries, right? Britain's got its second female leader. New Zealand had a women prime minister. Britain's women prime minister. I don't think the Americans are going to vote for the woman, but at least she can run now. Never had even a woman candidate. Okay? Women are not that dumb. They're not that dumb. They're not that bad. They're only dumb and bad because men didn't let them get educated. And by the same token, there's a lot of dumb men because they weren't educated. So our world is very different. We do not need to breed like rabbits. birth control is a wise idea because we're allowed to have sex with anyone we want, but we shouldn't be breeding that rapidly. So it's okay. Somebody should tell the Pope. Birth control is a pretty good idea. All you got to do is go to the Philippines, and you see 100 million people in the Philippines. 99.5 million of them are in total poverty because there's not enough jobs and not enough land for that many people. But they breed like rabbits because they don't want to get married because they're not allowed to get divorced, being Catholic. And they're not allowed to use birth control, being Catholic, because the Pope tells them these things. But they're human, so they're having sex. And they're just having babies. And babies and babies and babies. So there's such poverty. It's time to allow for birth control and abortion, if they choose. I mean, that's, it's a personal choice, right? But I'm just saying that's another prohibition. So we've got to get up with this, there's 7.5 billion people on the planet now. We're going to be 10 billion pretty soon. We can't keep going the way we are. Things have to change. Women are allowed to be educated. They are not a stupid, weak creature that we can control just to have a sex slave and a kitchen helper at home and a full-time babysitter. Okay? So look for the original reason for things and then adapt accordingly to today's circumstances. Learn about your teachings, which are not really learn about the real religious teachings. Then learn about what has been added to it. Learn about why don't Jews and Muslims eat pork. Well, you know what? A couple of thousand years ago, that was deadly because the plates were made of wood. They didn't have proper hygiene and refrigeration, and pork develops trichinosis, which you die from. Okay? But you'll eat a duck. Did you know a duck has more fat than a pig? If you eat a duck with its skin, you're getting so much fat it's going to kill you if you eat too many ducks. But ducks are kosher. And ducks are halal. So it isn't the health from the point of the fat in the meat. Think, please. If you want to gain control of your life, you have to think. And you have to look for why is it this way. And if you don't look for why everything is the way it is, you will not evolve. Because human nature is to evolve. Or we can say, why are we here? To evolve. Okay. But if you never learn to think, you will never evolve. Because if you live with your fixed opinions, you will stay the same. And staying the same means there's no evolution. There's no growth. Which means digressing. Because you don't stand still. You go forward or you go backwards. For example, because I have to use relationships, because you know what? My nickname is Dr. Love. I'm supposed to be a spiritual teacher. I'm supposed to be a what I call behavioral psychology, teaching you how to grow and evolve. And you know what? 80-90% of the problems people come to me with is always a relationship issue. So I like to use that. If you're going to stick to your standards, your rules that are based on traditions of religious, that are based on things that we had to adapt to 1,000 years ago, there's no evolution. Now, in today's world, we're doing a lot of intermarrying, religiously, culturally, and so on. Because a lot of Muslim women say, I won't marry a Muslim man, at least in Malaysia. A lot of Malay girls say, oh, I don't want a Malay man. So I want someone who's not Malay, because the Malay men treat the women very badly, because they can get away with it here, in Malaysia here. And so they want a non-Muslim, a non-Malay man. But then they say, well, because of my tradition, you have to convert to Islam to marry me. And so what happens? They don't get the good men, because the good man says, you want me to love you as you are? I want you to love me as I am. So don't tell me to change my identity and get circumcised. Because you're telling me I have to change major stuff here. But what? So you see, so they lose the good man. So what happens? She'll stay single. If she stays single, not only is she missing out on the joys of life, maybe she could have produced some good children. Not going to happen. Because there's no evolution with today's world in adapting to your values. Okay. So this is what I'm saying, is you have to question all your values, your beliefs, everything that you're being taught, and go back to the original beginning. You know, it's an interesting thing. I wanted to know, why did Jews cover their head? You know, a Jew has to wear a head covering, preferably at all times, and it's their religion. So they all do this because it's the religion, right? No, I change. Internet's great. You can learn so much. So I looked it up. Where did the Jews begin covering their head? There is nothing in the Old Testament, in the Talmud. They're not in there as religious teachings that a man must cover his head. Absolutely nowhere. It came years later, and when you do Talmudic research, like this is to find out where the origination of a Jewish law is, religious law is, you'll find the references of where head coverings began. And if you've ever seen the European Jews, they're called the Hasidim. They wear a vest with 4 corners, and the corner is tied a long tassel. And the tassel, this is worn undergarment, but the tassel is hanging out of your clothing. And it's the same reason the Jews cover their head. It is to remember God. Because we're humans, right? We get busy with our pleasures, our joys, our business, our worries, our fears, our work, and we forget God. So if you always have to wear a head covering and feel it, or you have these tassels hanging out of your clothes, which are quite long. They're very long, so they're swinging all the time as you're walking. It's a reminder of God. So God never said to do this. Some smart guy somewhere in history figured it out and said, hey, this is a good idea. So let me do this so I always remember God and be more conscious. And now it's considered this is what you do. This is your religion teaches it. God told us to. When I was young, I went in a Hebrew school. I was 12. And I asked the teacher, lady, funny enough, when you hear the answer, you'll know why it was strange that it was a lady giving me this answer. Because the girls don't have to cover their heads. Because remember, girls were always kept uneducated. So they were just to stay home, take care of the babies, cook my food, be my sex slave, right? Girls didn't have to cover their head. Only the boys males have to cover their head. So I asked the teacher, who was a lady, I said, and she's very religious, why is this? And she says, well, the reason you have to put a head covering is because God is very powerful and he can see through your skull into your brain and your thoughts. So your thoughts are, dirty and corrupt, and, so you put this head covering so God doesn't have to look at your dirty thoughts and all the thoughts you're thinking. So the first and obvious thing is, if he can see through my hair and my skull, I'm sure he can see through a little piece of cloth. That was the first stupidity. But then the thing that struck me also more is, so girls don't have a brain? Right? Because they don't have to cover it. According to the religion, again, girls have to cover their head when they get married. Why? Because hair is extremely attractive. And if you're a pretty girl with pretty hair, and you know how girls love to do things with their hair, and you're my wife, I don't want you doing things to attract other men. So hence came the idea of head covering, which is probably part of Islam too, right? I don't want you to show your pretty face to any other man because I don't want you attracting another man who you may be attracted to because you may have an affair and go off with him and I'll lose my wife. So it's a very convenient excuse to control you So you are not attracting other men and saying God commanded. Okay. Right? So all these things, we have to look at why we do these things. Because the problem is, we are now living a life, be it religious, political, cultural, gender, that is based on events or concepts created to serve a purpose that is no longer valid or appropriate. So in these examples, there's the subjugation of women so that men could control you and you're their prisoner and slave and possession. All right? So look at this concept. Every belief and opinion, and here's your exercise for today. Every belief and opinion that you have, everything, no matter how valid it is, and I'm not saying you have to change it necessarily, but no matter how valid it is, every belief and opinion that you have, which differs from any other human being, which means that anything that is political, cultural, or religious will differ from somebody else because they'll have a different opinion. And you have to question, is this good for me, helping me to grow, to experience the fullness of my life? Or is it in any way limiting me, meaning has at any point in my life, present or will be in the future, has this principle or will this principle or belief make me suffer some sort of loss or missed opportunity? For example, the Muslim woman who meets the perfect man, they're totally in love, but she won't marry him because he won't become a Muslim. So is the principle of saying I must marry a Muslim to my benefit? Or would I rather be an old maid and stay alone all my life? Okay? And, it goes with other religions. But somehow it seems every other religion will accept somebody of a different faith, generally. So I'll pick on that one. So examine every belief you have, now just as an exercise, right? Every belief you have and project, can this harm me in some way? And the answer will always be yes. And then say, okay, where did this principle or rule come from? Where did it begin? Who started it? Why? What purpose did it serve? Because it must have served a purpose somewhere, otherwise somebody would not have come up with it. A lot of times the purpose is to subjugate women, to make them easy to control. Or it is to rile up my people so that I can lead them to war, so that I can be not only king of my land, but king of that land also. So I can fill people with hatred of that religion or of that sect within our religion, so that I can get them to actually go and risk their lives and kill the other guys so I can take all their money or land. So look for the original source of every belief and opinion, and you will start a revolution. You will become more independent. You will become your own person. So the reason we have to do this exercise is to develop free thinking, which is not just free thinking, but is in objective thinking. This is the most important, right? We need to become objective. We need to release all our fixed opinions so that we're no longer limited and imprisoned by these opinions. So it is to develop an objective mind. Now, why do we need an objective mind? To free ourselves from the prison of our own thoughts. And an objective person doesn't have arguments and fights and conflicts and misery and sufferings. An objective person is free. An objective person can be truly compassionate. And an objective person can actually progress in their spiritual cultivation. Or just have good relationships. deal with their children better, raise better children, be better in the workforce, run a business better so the employees are having a better place to work. So all of this is to develop a more objective mind, an objective way of seeing everything, so that you can become a person who makes the world a better place rather than propagate limitations and misery for yourself and everyone else. Okay.